People do not fear written words until those words begin to speak among those who were never meant to understand them. It was in the year when winter came early to the small city of Vreux, nestled deep within 14th century France, where snow fell onto slate rooftops that no one bothered to look up at. Vreux was a diocesan town, neither fertile nor crowded, but its church was large, and the shadows of its priests swept across the square each Sunday like dark wings. Here, salvation was distributed through confessions mumbled in Latin, a language that almost none of the peasants truly understood. But they nodded devoutly, as if they did because to not nod was to reject God. And in the middle of that damp mold of faith stood a woman named Isabeau, brown-haired, bright-eyed, living by her threadwork near the market. A woman no one paid much attention to until the day she was discovered to be literate. Literate, a crime, in that age, meant only for men, clerics, and the officially sanctified. No one knew exactly where Isabeau had learned. Some whispered her father had once been a scribe. Others claimed a traveling merchant had once lodged at her family home when she was young. But whatever the origin, one thing was certain: she could read not only common texts, but the Bible itself, in Latin, and even in an old French translation that the church had banned since 1234. She didn't boast of it. But one day, at the crowded market, an old woman handed her a smeared note with instructions from the parish priest, and without thinking, Isabeau read it aloud. Her voice was steady, soft, and clear. Passers-by stopped. The old woman froze, and the next morning, church guards knocked on her door before dawn. From that moment, Isabeau's life was torn apart like a tapestry frayed by rain. She was locked beneath the cathedral in a stone cell colder than any season, lit only by a narrow slit of light from the ceiling. No one beat her. They didn't need to. They left her there, on damp stone, to think, to repent, to return to true faith. But Isabeau did not cry. She did not beg, and that frightened them more. A woman who does not weep, who does not call for her mother, who does not plead for mercy, either she has lost her mind, or she knows something they do not. During interrogation, she simply said, "I read the scriptures because I wish to understand what I believe. I do not trust others to speak for God. I want to hear him in words I know." In the stone chamber where the questioning took place, the priests sat silent for a long while. Then one of them, draped in gold-threaded robes, old and brittle, spoke sharply. "No one is permitted to interpret the holy word alone. To do so is to challenge the church, and to challenge the church is to challenge God himself." Isabeau smiled. It was not arrogance. It was sorrow. The smile of someone who has just heard a verse recited incorrectly by someone too proud to notice. Days later, the sentence was declared. Not hanging, not the sword, but fire, for according to the law issued by Pope Gregory, heretics, especially women, were to be purified by flame, so their souls might return to God through suffering, rather than remain on earth to inspire others. The execution date was set for All Saints' Day, the most crowded Sunday of the year, a day when church bells would ring loud with prayers and serve as a dirge for burning flesh. They built the pyre in front of the cathedral. Dry wood was stacked 3 days in advance, straw scattered beneath, a single upright post planted deep into the center, waiting to hold a soft body that would not resist. That morning was so cold, people dared not breathe too deeply. The northern wind swept across the square, snapping cloaks and scarves like funeral flags that no one dared raise. The church bells rang 3 long notes, each one a gentle reminder that today was not like other days, that today was All Saints' Day, and that today was the day a soul would be sent through fire. Isabeau was led out of the stone cellar by a narrow path behind the chapel. 2 guards, 1 priest ahead, and an older woman trailing behind to recite the final prayers. They did not bind her hands. There was no need. She did not run. From the moment she stepped into the light, her gaze never wavered, no fear, no defiance. Only a silence stretched long like the echo of someone who has already accepted the end, yet chooses to walk toward it anyway. Villagers lined the streets, crowding like they would for a procession of saints. They whispered, they glanced, they crossed themselves. Some bowed their heads, some turned away. But no one spoke. Not one voice. Children had been told not to look. Yet they slipped through adult legs to glimpse the scene. A red-haired girl clutched her mother's hand and whispered, "Why are they burning her?" The mother gave no answer. She only held the girl's hand tighter. As Isabeau neared the pyre, she raised her head. The scent of damp straw, dry wood, and sheep fat smeared on the stake to help the fire catch faster mingled into a deadly stew waiting to boil. The pyre had been built with meticulous care by the town's best carpentera, cruel irony. A structure meant for death, yet assembled like a festival stage. Dried flowers were scattered at its base. The ropes were tightly braided. Even the folds of the cloth wrapped around the bottom post had been arranged to catch flame quickly. They say all burnings begin the same, with silence, then smoke, then screaming. But this time, no one knew whether there would be a scream. When they tied Isabeau to the stake, she still said nothing. She looked up at the top of the cathedral, where a black crow perched on the statue of Saint Jeanneit's wings spread slightly, glossy in the light, like a final mockery of the faith she once believed in. A young priest stepped forward, unrolled the scroll. His voice trembled slightly as he read, "Isabeau, daughter of Jacques de Lorme, is declared a heretic for unlawfully reading, interpreting, and disseminating an unapproved version of the Holy Scriptures. You have refused to repent. You have remained stubborn in sin. And now, by the mercy of God and the authority of His Church, you shall be purified by sacred flame. May your soul be forgiven." He rolled the scroll closed. His eyes brushed against Isabeau's face, as if about to say something, but before he could. A hand gestured behind him. The torch-bearer stepped forward. The fire began at the straw. Straw caught the wood. Wood caught the cloth. And the cloth caught the skin. In the first moments, there was no sound. Only scent, a sweet, acrid smell that turned the stomachs of those nearby. Some turned away, some vomited, some wept. But Isabeau did not scream, not a sound. She lifted her face. Her skin reddened instantly in the heat. Her eyes stayed open, locked on a point far beyond through the crowd, past the rooftops, above the pale sky, reaching toward a place whose name no one dared to speak. And then, in the instant before flame engulfed her fully, she spoke. Her voice was not loud, not weak, but clear enough to carry through the wind, enough to make every ear freeze and catch each word. "I do not fear the Scriptures. I fear those who keep others from reading them." That sentence cut through the morning fog like a blade. No one answered, and the fire continued to consume. When the fire died, no one stepped forward. The embers still glowed. The stake blackened halfway down, and what remained collapsed into a pile of ash too heavy to name. A priest ordered the ashes gathered and cast into the river near the monastery, as if fire alone could not erase a soul, and water was needed to wash away memory, but no water could carry the weight of the silence that followed. All of Vreux sank into what the elders called the time without words. No one spoke of her. No one asked, but no one forgot. The red-haired girl from that day grew up to become a weaver, often sitting in silence beside the wall where Isabeau had once sold her embroidery in the market. The carpenter who had built the pyre stopped making chairs for the church. He asked to leave the town, carrying his hollow toolbox and a gaze that no longer met other eyes. The old woman who had asked Isabeau to read the smeared note retreated into the monastery, never to return to the market again. There were rumors that she kept a scorched scrap of Isabeau's dress in a wooden box beside her crucifix, but no one dared ask. Then, years later, when the world had changed, when French Bibles were openly read under sunlight, a stranger arrived in Vreux. He crossed the square, stood for a long time before the old wall behind the cathedral and the place where the pyre had been built, now just moss-covered stone and sleeping doves. He said nothing. He simply placed a small book on the stone ledge. The first page bore a single, steady line of handwriting. For those who died so we could read, in a world where the written word had once been a weapon hoarded by men in holy robes. Isabeau was a small scratch, but that scratch had drawn blood longer than fire ever could. And from then on, people began to speak again, not in sermons, not in doctrine, not even in books, but in strange, quiet moments. Like when someone saw a woman reading in the marketplace and didn't see it as a threat anymore. They said she reads, and this time, they smiled. No one burned anyone again.